Hello, I'm Marlis Arnold, trade show marketing consultant and author of the book, Build a Better Trade Show Image. Welcome to the Trade Show Insights podcast with news, tips, and tools to expand your knowledge of exhibiting. Today we're featuring a topic that I bet few exhibitors have ever considered: how to better communicate with deaf attendees at your shows. Our guest today for the Trade Show Insights podcast is Susan Layton, and she has been an interpreter for the deaf for almost 20 years. She's done interpreting for all kinds of settings in education, community, business, and she's also worked as an interpreter at dozens of trade shows across the country over the last 20 years, and also served as the president of the Nevada chapter of the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. She currently lives in Austin, Texas, and does remote interpreting and also pre-recorded interpreting for trade shows and events. So, Susan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, let's start out, because this is an area, I've been a trade show consultant for years, and I have to say, until I came across your comment on LinkedIn, this is an area I had never even given any thought, and I'm sure most exhibitors are the same way. So can you tell me a little bit about some of the comments that you hear from deaf attendees about what it's like for them to try to walk a trade show floor?
Well, I think, every deaf person is different, but I do know that several deaf people have come to appreciate more those who are prepared for their visits, meaning that they know how to communicate with a deaf person. Oftentimes the trade shows will provide a sign language interpreter, and when they do, of course, going around to different exhibits, the deaf people can talk with the people within the booth and ask questions and whatnot, but oftentimes there are things that kind of get in their way. For example, one of the exhibitors might say, well, tell the deaf person, and can you tell him or her this or that? And that's not talking directly to the deaf person. The deaf person is there to ask questions, to get the information they need. And when they go through saying, talk to this person, do you mind telling them this, it kind of gets in the way of the communication. And it can be frustrating for the deaf person.
Well, and it's also like you're talking down to them as well. Like you can't, like you said, it's not direct conversation. It's like you feel like you can't talk directly to that person.
Right. A few other things that deaf people find frustrating when they're going to talk with people in the trade show is the focus of the conversation isn't totally on them, because they are having to wait for a response or wait for the interpretation to happen either to the deaf person or from the deaf person. Oftentimes the person asking the questions will kind of get sidetracked or not focused entirely on them. Instead, they'll hear something in the background. They'll kind of wave their attention towards what they're hearing. And that can be very frustrating and upsetting to the deaf person, because they're wanting to get the information they need and they don't have their full undivided attention.
Right.
So that's,
of course, that's kind of a side effect of our ADD society these days too.
True.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it does turn them off, though. If there is something that they need to divert their attention to, of course, being polite is always a good thing to do.
Right.
I guess if the deaf person comes without an interpreter, one thing that I would suggest is grab a piece of paper and a pen and just start the conversation right there. It is a slower way of communicating, but I think that taking your time with your consumer that's there will make them feel important, just as a hearing person coming in would feel.
Well, and the biggest message that sends is, hey, we're making an effort. It's not just, that they give the deaf person the brush off and it's like, well, we don't have an interpreter, so we can't talk to you. It actually shows they're making that effort to try to communicate in whatever method they can.
Right.
So what % of exhibitors offer interpreter, or what percent of show? It sounds like you work more with the show, and then the show kind of sends you around to the different exhibitors. Is that how it works?
Yeah, most of my experience has been that way, where the trade show itself hires the interpreters, and then we go with the deaf person to the different exhibits.
Okay. And so what would you estimate? Do most shows offer this, or only a few, or?
More and more now, if a deaf person registers, there isn't a big hassle. They do say, sure, let's get an interpreter for you. There have been times, though, that they say, no, you bring your own interpreter, which, again, is very frustrating because according to the Americans with Disabilities Act, that's not something that a deaf person should take upon themselves. It's actually the responsibility of the trade show to provide that interpreter, or an exhibit itself to provide the interpreter.
Right. So therefore, more and more shows are doing it because it is becoming expected.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the options for trade show interpreting? I know you talked a little bit about that you do remote interpreting. Can you kind of explain how that would work rather than walking around with them?
Absolutely. There's two ways we can approach the remote, either through the trade show, the people who are hosting the trade show, or the actual exhibits, the companies who are providing the services or products. They can also hire an interpreter. Now, with the remote interpreting, we use a video software that we can see you guys, the interpreter, the exhibit, or the people they are attending, and they would be able to see us through this webcam. And then we just interpret just like we were on site, just interpreting back and forth between the person at the booth and the deaf attendee. Probably with trade shows, the most effective way to hear us, because it is oftentimes quite loud, is to have a headset, and that would be directly routed to the computer or iPhone or whatever equipment you're using, and then we can hear each other more effectively. But remote is really nice. It is a cheaper way of providing services as compared to on-site interpreting. It can be cheaper, I should say. And so it's quite easy as well. It's nice having the company hire the interpreter because the interpreter can actually learn the ins and outs of that company's products, their services, and be able to sell their products and services more effectively. Having an interpreter there at the trade show is wonderful for the deaf person and going from booth to booth, but oftentimes the interpreter doesn't really know the ins and outs of the product that deaf person may be looking into.
Right.
So, and they try to interpret the best that they can and hope that either the message gets from the company representative to the deaf person, or from the deaf person to the company representative. And sometimes that gets lost in translation because they don't know perhaps a lot about their products, and that can lose business perhaps. But
well, and you're not a mind reader. I mean, you can't. If the deaf person is confused and struggling, they may not really be able to communicate what it is they don't understand. But it's almost like skipping a step. I mean, if you understand the product, you're better able to explain it directly to them, I would think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so those are the options with remote and on-site interpreting too. But the remote is awfully nice because you can have somebody there either on call. So you say, hey, can you be available from 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and we'll pay you a base rate. And then when we use you, then we'll pay you for that time. And so it's a lot cheaper than having somebody on site from 10 to 6.
Oh, definitely.
And then you can have an interpreter there ready to go 10 to 6 as well and pay them for that time. So with remote, you have a lot more flexibility and a lot more options. And if you have it within the booth itself, representing the company, again, they're able to know the ins and outs of what you're talking about and what you're trying to sell and what you're trying to get out to the community.
Well, and it sounds like, too, with the cameras and everything, that you're not really sacrificing the full effect of the interpreting by doing it remotely either, that it's still going to be just as effective as it would be face-to-face.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And you don't have to go into a lot of detail here, but just, would an exhibitor be looking at a lot of added expense to have this, or is this something that they could very easily work into their budgets? Because, everybody's worried about budgets these days.
Oh, absolutely. It can be quite cost affordable. Again, with a remote interpreter, if you're going to have it within just the company's own booth, their exhibit, then you can work with the interpreter to decide how you want to provide the service, either just as an on-call basis or with you there live from 10 to 6 or whatever your time may be. The same can be said for the trade show, for the people hosting the trade show. It can be a lot more affordable because, you have to pay for the interpreter when they're on site. You have to pay for their time. You also have to pay for a team interpreter. Then you also have to pay portal to portal, and sometimes parking, sometimes food. So on-site interpreting can kind of add up. Again, it might be the better solution, and what we're here for and what we're trying to get out to the community is get the best solution for your consumers and for you as well.
Well, and I would think a lot of it would have to do with how large the show is. I mean, you're talking, one of the mega shows in Vegas or Chicago or something, then definitely an on-site person could be utilized pretty much consistently throughout the day, whereas a smaller show or just a single exhibitor, like you said, the on-call remote would probably make a lot of sense because you may only need that person, 8 or 10 times throughout the day and not constantly.
Right.
Anything else that you want to add about how the whole process works or just tips that you would give to exhibitors and show managers?
I think the first and foremost is to be polite and respectful. I think we all know that, but sometimes we don't know how to do it with somebody who has a quote-unquote disability. And so I think just kind of learning how to communicate with them respectfully is probably my first thing. After that, I would say there's a number of solutions in communicating with a deaf person.
Well, and it, like you said, it all goes back to thinking about it and putting yourself in their shoes. Like you said, the sensitivity and being respectful. And, that's a good rule of thumb with no matter who comes through your booth. I always teach exhibitors, you shouldn't prejudge based on their name badge because a lot of times they'll look at the badge, and if it's the wrong color, they think it's not a buyer, and so they don't take them seriously. Well, the same thing here. It's, you don't want to, as an exhibitor, you never want to look at somebody and go, oh, they're a deaf person, they're not going to, they're not going to spend money with me, or they're not here to buy, or whatever. You need to take it seriously and really focus on them and convey your message clearly in the best way you can.
Absolutely, and I want to add on to that. The deaf community itself is very small, and a lot of times a deaf person who perhaps lived in Chicago growing up associated with several deaf people there, well, when they moved across country, the person that they knew or they meet there knows a person they lived in Chicago. And, I mean, the deaf community itself is just so small, and so when communication gets out that this company doesn't treat me as a deaf person the way that I feel that should be treated, that word gets out like wildfire. And not only that, a lot of deaf people that I've worked with in trade shows will go there not as a buyer, but just as a patron or attendee, and then go back to the buyers and say, hey, this company I like and I understood, and we communicated well. And that is one of the number one things is they communicated well with me, and I felt like we really got to the meat of things because we communicated well.
Oh, and interesting. So they're almost like a secret shopper for their company then.
A lot of them are, yeah.
Well, that's a good point to keep in mind. Again, like we said, treat everybody with respect and assume everyone's a potential buyer.
Yep, that's right. One other option for interpreting is, again, you have the on-site interpreting. You also have the remote interpreting. You also have pre-recorded interpreting. And with that, it's really nice for trade shows to pre-record their information in ASL. So if, let's say, they did have an interpreter with them provided by the host trade show company, if they brought that interpreter and the interpreter maybe wasn't very good at being able to express what the company wanted them to know, and the communication just maybe wasn't happening totally. It's nice to have pre-recorded information on products, on services about the company, and with that you can put the pre-recording on a computer, on an iPhone, on an iPod, on an iPad, you name it, you can put it on there. And let's say product number 1, you wanted to explain just the basics of it. If you wanted to explain the details of it, how it beats other services, other companies, other products, whatever it is, you can have that pre-recorded in ASL, and you just click on the product. Maybe it'll have an icon if that's what you would prefer, have an icon where it has the picture of the product. Click on that, and then that comes the pre-recording, and the message is rendered in ASL. The deaf consumer can watch that. Then they can understand the ins and outs of what you're wanting to sell to them or explain to them. And then, question and answers can go after that, either through remote or on-site interpreting.
That's a great idea, because that kind of goes back to your point of having an interpreter that it can explain and talk specifically about that exhibitor's products. So,
absolutely.
Like you said, rather than being there to answer the individual questions, you kind of start back a step previously and just have it pre-recorded so it can explain it all to them to start with, and then, hopefully answer a lot of their questions up front.
Right. And that can often be cheaper in the long run, because you have a product that you have for, let's say, 3 years that you continue to show, and that video that's pre-recorded in ASL can then be shown throughout those 4 years or however long
at all
you
your
have
shows.
The product. Yeah, and so you don't have to hire an interpreter to just interpret the same thing again and again throughout all of your shows that you present at. And so just having your information with you on hand, of course, if you have new products or updates to an existing product or services or whatever, then you can then have that
just
pre-recorded again. Yeah, you just either add a video, you scratch the whole thing, you edit just a part of it, whatever is needed, that can be done. And that's one of the services that we provide is the pre-recorded interpreting, and it's an awfully nice service. And again, it's cheaper, especially in the long run.
Good tips. All right. Well, thank you very much, Susan. We appreciate it. You've provided us a wealth of information and really, hopefully woken up a lot of exhibitors to this need that's out there that they've probably been ignoring all these years. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Trade Show Insights is protected by the Creative Commons copyright license. You may feel free to share this recording with colleagues as long as it is shared in its entirety and is not used for commercial purposes. To learn more, please see the link in the show notes. Well, that's it for this episode of Trade Show Insights. Be sure to check out our show notes at tradeshowinsights.com. Until next time, I'm Marlis Arnold. Thanks for listening.